The toolkit is still in draft form, and we definitely want to get feedback from everyone here in attendance today. We'll have an opportunity at the end of the presentation and after the end of going through the website for you to ask questions through the webinar. We'll be able to type those in the webinar control panel that you have on your computer, and then we'll be able to see those and share them with the group. And then following this webinar as well, we will be distributing an evaluation form and an information form that you can fill out. Tell us, what you liked about the toolkit, what areas might need some improvement, or other items that you might be open to seeing in the future to be added. So at this point, I will be turning over the presentation to Elizabeth Carvajal from Metro, who will start our presentation and provide a brief overview, and then we'll continue on from there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and again, thank you so much for taking the time to participate. My name is Elizabeth Carvajal. I'm a senior manager with Metro, and I manage Metro's TOD planning grant program and this transit supported planning toolkit. On the webinar this afternoon, I'm joined by our project team, which includes Metro staff, Global Green, who has been our strategic advisor, and our consultant team, who is led by IBI Group and also includes Ramey and Associates, Secure Design, RCL Co., and Catherine Padilla and Associates. So next slide. Next slide. So the webinar will be broken up into a few sections. We're going to start off with providing you with an overview of the webinar, really the toolkit itself and how we got here. We will then get into it and really walk you through it and the various components. And then we really encourage you to provide us with your questions and comments, as Bill said. So there's a chat box. Please type your comments and your questions, and we hope to engage in a webinar Q&A. Okay, next. So the Transit Supportive Planning Toolkit was a project that was funded by the Strategic Growth Council. And essentially, it's really a toolkit that's grounded in transit supportive planning, meaning planning that will support our transit system to increase transit ridership. We believe that the toolkit is really a resource for our region. It includes best practices, tools, and policies, and in many cases, real-world relevant examples of how we can do this work in LA County. Additionally, one of our key goals was to really include useful information to make the case to do this planning work. Additionally, we looked at funding sources that were available to help us really effectuate this work. Next. So for Metro, this is a critical effort. As you all know, we are in the process of effectuating a really significant and transformative expansion of our transit system. As a partner, we have a vested interest in planning around transit stations that really creates an environment that promotes, that encourages, and really supports transit riders and that interface between public transportation and surrounding communities. We see this toolkit as an easy-to-access resource that will allow our region to really achieve state-mandated goals of reducing vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. Additionally, we hope to really integrate this toolkit as a key component of our TOD planning grant program. Next. So what does this mean for you? We think that fundamentally this is a resource. It is a resource with a wealth of information on locally relevant best practices, tools, and strategies to advance this work. It is a resource that will really help us make the case to effectuate this. And fundamentally, we think it's a resource to help position our region to really secure funding, and most importantly, to, as partners, leverage our transit system as a resource for improving communities and our region. And with that, I'll hand it over to Bill.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. So I'll provide a brief overview, kind of how we got here to the process we're at in the development of the toolkit itself. We started this process about 18 months ago in November of 2014 and really worked initially for some background research and review of other toolkits that were available not only within California but really across the country to get an idea of what tools and resources were already available and which ones were looked to provide beneficial information and seemed to have information that would be relevant to the challenges and the opportunities that are present within Los Angeles County. And then building on that work, we conducted a series of 3 advisory forums in the spring of 2015. And we had several city staff members from cities throughout the county attend those advisory forums and provide us with input in terms of what they would like to see in the toolkit and how the toolkit could become a useful resource for planning efforts for transit supportive planning throughout the county. Using that information, we worked quite a bit through the summer and fall of 2015 to identify the characteristics of TOD, what are the characteristics that supportive or successful transit supportive development or transit-oriented development has, the different types of places that are present within Los Angeles County. The county is very different, and the cities and communities are very different within the county, and we wanted to make sure we had an understanding of the broad and variation that is present in terms of the density, land use types, and land use mix that's present throughout the county. And then look to develop environmental and economic tools also during this time. And then the work that we've done this year, through the bulk of this year in the first half, has really been focused on the development of the policy tools, which we'll be sharing here later in the webinar in their draft form. And this is really the meat of the toolkit itself, and really the key resources that we hope you all will be able to access and utilize and find beneficial for your everyday work efforts. This summer we've been working with Metro to develop the website and get the information on board and online so it's available for use. And we're in the process of conducting local agency workshops. There's 5 in total. This webinar is one of them. We did 3 in-person workshops in the last week of July in various locations throughout the county. And then we're conducting an APA-sponsored event next Wednesday evening within downtown Los Angeles at IBI's office in downtown Los Angeles as well. That will also present the same information that we are walking through here today. So we're providing a lot of opportunities for planning staff to be able to access the website, learn about it before it goes live, and provide some input before we go live here in the next couple of weeks. So a brief refresher of the advisory forums that we conducted in spring of 2015, what we heard from city staff in those meetings. First and foremost, one of the key items was a desire for implementation and identifying specific tools that cities could apply and utilize, that it wouldn't just be high-level guidelines. Cities and city staff were really interested in having information that they could apply in their day-to-day work efforts. And we also looked for examples, local case studies and examples with links to the web content within the city websites. So we'd have that information. That information would be available as well. And we wanted to have that information be available locally so that you'd be able to, as a city staff member, be able to access that information online, as well as be able to reach out to those city staff within Los Angeles County to talk to them individually and learn what they might have, what successes they had, what challenges they had, and what lessons learned might be possible. Another key item was grants and funding. They kind of go together. Information about what funding grants are available for planning efforts and how implementation could be financed and funded into the future. Another key item was the selling of the project or the program to the community. How can the planning efforts be communicated to the community itself so that people are able to understand it and the community can be supportive of the effort? And then finally, another key item was flexibility. This alludes to what I talked about on the last slide, in that Los Angeles County and the communities and cities that are present are very diverse in terms of densities, land use types, and development types. And we wanted to have tools and strategies that really could be applied across a range of different communities and jurisdictions. So the contents of the website, which we'll be getting into shortly, there's 5 main areas within the website itself. First is the TOD characteristics, and there's 10 characteristics of transit supportive places that we've identified that are generally commonly present within successful TOD areas or transit supportive areas. And the tools that we've identified and developed are linked back to these 10 characteristics. And so you'll see throughout the website how the tools themselves link up with the different characteristics and how they can apply and help cities achieve the different characteristics that are present. And then we have information related to environmental tools. This specifically looks at analytical tools that can help cities quantify the benefits that come from TOD, both from an environmental standpoint in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle miles traveled, as well as from a health standpoint, and information that you can utilize to model related to public health and benefits that could be provided from compact development. But the idea behind these tools is providing information about the models that are available and how they're utilized, so that you as city staff would be able to generate information that's commonly asked for in grant applications in terms of these metrics. The economic tools focus on first and foremost, the economic benefits that come from transit-supportive planning and transit-supportive development, and then also walking through the different financing and funding programs that are available at the state, federal, and local levels. The outreach tools walk through different strategies that can be utilized together to help engage the community in the decision-making process and hopefully get the community behind and supportive of the transit program that's proposed. And then the planning and policy tools really are the meat of the toolkit itself. There's over 25 different specific policy, planning, and regulatory tools that we've outlined. And each tool has one or more case studies. I believe we have over 75 case studies in total that are available throughout the tool and that have brief summaries on the website and links to the content as well if you'd like more detailed information. So at this point, I'm going to be turning the presentation over to Matt Ramey from Ramey & Associates, and he'll be beginning to walk through the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Bill. Do I have control?
You do.
Okay, excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Ramey with Ramey & Associates. It's nice to have so many folks join us for the webinar. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes and talk first about the 10 elements of transit-supportive places, and then jump into the beginning of the discussion of the policy and planning tools. As Bill mentioned, some of the feedback that we got from the advisory groups and the work sessions was that folks wanted the toolkit to be implementation focused and have case studies and have specifics. What we know is out there through our research is there's a lot of toolkits on transit supportive places and transit oriented development that define the characteristics of TOD. However, we did also, while there are a lot out there, we did also feel like it was important for us to define for Metro how Metro is really defining transit supportive places and the components of that, because it is more than just the transit system itself. And so we spent some time going into the research, into academic research, because we wanted to not just list out what those characteristics are, but also to provide information showing the extent to which each of the characteristics impacts transit ridership, which is, of course, critical for Metro. And so through the work, we came up with these 10 categories, these 10 elements of transit supportive places. And I'll just go through them quickly. The first is compact design, which is the intensity of development. The second is complete neighborhoods, the mix of uses within each neighborhood. As Bill mentioned, not every place is the same, so complete for one neighborhood might be different than complete for another. One could be residential focused, another could be employment focused in terms of a transit supportive place. The third is the street network and connectivity. It's critical not just to think about the transit system itself, but how people are going to access that system, and the street network and the connectivity of two different places within the neighborhood as well as the transit is critical. The fourth is site layout, parking layout, and building design. The research clearly shows that if you can have the right density and the right mix, and if you design it wrong, it's going to have a big impact on people's ability and desire to take transit. So locating buildings in an appropriate place, having easy access from the street to the building, putting parking in the right place are all really critical. The fifth is affordable housing. The research shows that those who live in affordable housing tend to have fewer vehicles and rely more on transit. The sixth is commercial stabilization, business retention, and expansion. As sort of an extension of the complete neighborhoods, having stable businesses within a transit supportive area is critical to the success of transit itself. The seventh is transit prioritization, accessibility, and area design. This characteristic or element focuses more on the design of the transit station and how people access that station. The eighth is parking management. As many of you all know, the amount of parking can have a large impact on people's desire to take transit. And so in transit supported places, we found a lot of research showing that as you manage parking, you can also affect transit ridership. The ninth is transportation demand management. In other words, providing incentives for people to get out of their cars and take transit or carpool. And then the 10th is pedestrian and bicycle circulation. And with this characteristic, we know that the majority of people access transit by walking and by biking. And so having that circulation system combined with the connectivity and the appropriate design of buildings has a large impact. Clearly, you need more than just one of these in order to have a successful transit supportive place. So it's really about the combination of these in different ways that create successful transit supportive places. I'm going to take a minute here and switch over to the website to show how what's on the website for these characteristics. So I'll click on the characteristics of transit supportive places, do my best to scroll down here. Apologize, it's a little bit slow. And so here we see the 10 characteristics, compact design, complete neighborhoods. And when you click on each one, let's click on compact design, you see a brief description of what it is. And then you can go to the See More tab, and it opens up another website where it gets into detail here on different strategies that are used to effectuate compact design. And then how effective the tool, how effective this characteristic is. And so you'll see references to research of meta-studies that show what we know about this characteristic and its impact, particularly on VMT and transit ridership. Okay, and so we can go back to the website, and you click on any of these. So affordable housing, they all have essentially the same, it's the same type of information that you see in each of these. So this is affordable housing. It looks at the strategies and then the effectiveness. And again, some data supported, and this can be actually helpful information for different jurisdictions when a council member might say, well, okay, this is great, but how is this going to have an impact, or what kind of benefit is this going to have for the community? How much is it going to reduce VMT? And some of that information is right here. And you can also then go to the specific studies to find more information. So going back to the PowerPoint, as Bill mentioned, with the place types, we also acknowledge that there is not a single, apologies here, let me get to this website. There's not a single type of place within the region, and the transit supported places are going to look very different depending on their context. We did spend some time thinking at the beginning about whether we would have information that says, if you're in this type of place, if you're in a high intensity place, you should have a minimum density of a certain number. And we decided essentially against that. What we really wanted to do was to give local governments the tools to make those decisions for themselves. So we did, however, show that these 10 characteristics get reflected differently in these different types of places. So this is an example of a small transit supportive place, and then I'm going to show small, medium, and large, and how some of these characteristics might change as you go from type of place to type of place. So this is small, lower intensity buildings. You might have bus transit. Streets might be a little bit wider, just as some examples here. This is the medium. It's 5,000 to 10,000 people per acre. Higher intensity buildings, maybe a more diverse mix of uses, and potentially higher intensity transit and more frequent transit service. And then this is the large, definitely higher intensity development, perhaps fixed rail system, a more diverse mix of uses, buildings closer to the street, narrower streets. So this is just some way of showing how those characteristics are can play out in different types of places. So then moving into the what we call the meat of the toolkit are the policy and planning tools. These tools contain strategies, plans, and programs that foster the 10 characteristics of transit supportive places. So we tried to make the connection between each tool and which of the characteristics of transit supportive places it implements the best. And then we have case studies, one or more case studies for each of the tools themselves. As Bill mentioned, there's about 25 tools in total and over 75 case studies. The tools are divided into 4 categories: land use, transportation and parking, urban design, and economic development. I'm going to talk about the land use tools, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bill to talk about the rest of them. The land use tools are, as you see, are listed here, and these generally fall into 4 broad categories: general plans, zoning, area plans, and then incentives and bonuses. And I'm just going to go through. I think I'm actually going to switch over to the website here in just a second. But the general plan tools are really about the land use designations and the vision within the plan, and then the specific policies and actions. And the purpose is clearly to set the vision for the community, and it's important to have that vision of transit supportive places within a general plan to make sure you have the intensities correct through the land use designations, and then to have supporting policies and actions that will allow transit supportive places to be developed. The zoning tools, we identified 3 of them: conventional zoning, form-based zoning, and overlay zones. And this clearly is how the general plan is implemented, is through the zoning. And zoning for transit supportive places can include things like identifying development intensities around a transit station or transit stop, establishing the right mix of uses, establishing the physical form of the station area, identifying and establishing the roadway design characteristics, and then all of this can really enhance the mix of uses, the intensity, and then the walkability and the access to transit. People have asked about whether one type of zoning is better than another. We think that there are, this really should be left to the discretion of the jurisdiction, so long as it achieves the intended outcome of increasing transit ridership, reducing VMT, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The third category is area planning tools. The 2 tools identified are specific plans and corridor plans. This type of planning allows you to dive deeper into a specific station area and identify vision, policies, regulations around that area. Corridors are mentioned because there are many corridors in the county that are also transit corridors, and corridors are different in that you can look at multiple stations along that corridor and identify the specific role of potentially each of those stops or station areas along that corridor. So you can look at larger rather than just one station, but you can look at the larger system and how all the stations function together. The last category is incentives and bonuses. Through the research, we found that there's quite a number of jurisdictions now that are providing incentives and bonuses for certain types of development, including development around transit stations. So this tool is something that we've actually really in the last 5 to 10 years, we've actually seen it come about more often, where projects are allowed to build either at higher intensities, perhaps with reduced parking, ratios or have different building mass requirements if they are located near transit, and also if they provide different types of community benefits such as affordable housing or open space. I'm going to switch here quickly to go to the website, and let me show you just a little bit of some of the some of these tools and how each one is laid out, so you can get a sense of that. Give me a second here. Apologies. Here, let's go to Planning Tools. Click on the section on the right. So this is the planning tools, and there's a brief introduction about what the tools are, and then you can see the tools, all of the tools listed down here. These are the 10 characteristics, and then we have land use and planning tools. Go down, and then underneath land use and planning tools, we have each of the specific tools themselves. So if we go to general plan vision and land use designations, it'll open up a new page that isn't working. We'll have to check that. Give me a second here. Let's try. Apologies. Okay, let's try TOD specific plans. Bill? Are you there, Bill?
I am here. I apologize. There we go. We have corridor plans. I tested.
All right. We're still working the bugs out in some of the websites and making sure it's working on all systems. So for each of the tools, we have a description, and then we have a list of outcomes that we expect, and then examples. And so we'll click on one of these examples, and it describes, and there is some amount of detail in these examples to get to some specific numbers about what the plan did, as well as links for a lot of them to more information on the plan. So we can go down, it says see more, and then it actually goes to the plan itself. So it really, we did try and provide links to the plans, to the case study, so that you can, so it becomes really more of a resource for local governments. Okay, Bill, I'm going to turn it back over to you. You want to take control?
Great, thank you, Matt. We'll do so. So I'll walk through the remaining tools that we have within the toolkit itself. There are several other areas that were identified, the first of which was transportation and parking tools. There were 11 total tools that we looked at in terms of transportation and parking, primarily focused on reducing the impacts caused by the automobile within transit-supported places, really looking for opportunities to make transit-supported places more walkable, more bikeable, and address one of the major challenges of transit-supported planning, and that is parking and the amount of land area, building space, and cost that's involved with the construction of parking within a transit-supportive place or transit-supportive community. So a couple of the tools that we wanted to highlight within the transportation side, first of which was or is bike share, which is a tool that's being utilized more and more within Los Angeles County. Both within the city of Santa Monica has rolled out a bike share program within the last year, which is a case study that we have shown and provided within the website. Metro is currently rolling out that agency's bike share program. It's currently in downtown Los Angeles and will be expanding into other locations within the county. This is a tool and a strategy that really helps to address the first and last mile challenge or problem that exists for transit stations, as well as helps to reduce vehicle miles traveled within transit-supported places. Next is parking management districts. These are strategies designed to maintain or manage and reduce parking demand, or better utilize the parking resources that are present within a district, with the objective of reducing the overall need for parking within the transit-supported place. We also look at transportation master plans. These are overall documents, really roadmaps for long-range transportation investment within a particular district, community, or transit-supportive place. They can come in several forms, including complete streets plans, bicycle and pedestrian plans, an active transportation strategy, station area mobility plans. There's a wide variety of plans that can be adopted depending on whether you're looking to improve transportation and transit and active modes on a citywide basis or more on a district or community basis. We also have urban design tools. There's 3 main urban design tools that were identified and included within the toolkit itself. The first 2 deal with both the public and private realm in terms of urban design. The first one with the private side, looking at cohesive and consistent standards in terms of building design and building type within the district. And then the second looking at the streetscape standards and design guidelines for the public right-of-way portions of the community and the transit supportive place. And the streetscape standards and design guidelines really feed into and are very much related to the transportation strategies and tools as well. They go hand in hand. And then the third one we identified, or tool we identified, was the community design overlay for a TOD district. And this really looks at the district holistically and the overall design philosophy and concept for that district. So just a brief overview of the building standards and design guidelines. It's intended to guide private development and focus on the interface, the meeting point between private development and the public realm, and really looking to orient buildings and orient the private development to encourage a walkable urban character and sustainable design throughout the district, so that the investments that a city or community may make in terms of the public right-of-way can be carried forward, and the goals and objectives are consistent as you move into the private realm, and that private realm really helps to re-emphasize the investment that's made in the public space. And the idea is also to create a visual consistency within the district so that people, when they're traveling through that transit supportive district or that TOD district, they really know that they're within that district and it is a special place. So then the environmental tools, as I mentioned earlier, the environmental tools are very much focused on the performance metrics that city staff are typically required to provide in terms of, or when you apply for grants at the state, federal, or local level. Really looking at providing the information and metrics related to greenhouse gas emission levels, vehicle miles traveled, vehicle trips, and changes to mode share. And we focused on identifying tools and models that can be used to assess and identify these environmental and health benefits within the transit supportive planning effort. So the website, which I'll go back to here in a moment to show how it's presented on the page itself, it provides an overview of the tools themselves, the use of the tools, their outputs, and their applicability to the planning and the grant writing process. We also identify the pros and cons of the models, really focusing on how easy or difficult are these models to utilize, how much data do they require as input, and how is the information output or distributed to the user, and is it easily accessible and easy to summarize. But within each of the models, we identify also the outputs, what information is available, whether they're environmentally focused or whether they include both environmental as well as health and demographic data. We also identify within the website and the toolkit itself the economic benefits of transit supportive development. One other item that we heard quite a bit in the advisory forums was assistance or an interest from city staff and planning staff throughout the county to have more information and data available so that you're able to make the case to your policymakers and to your communities about what benefits would flow to your community from the implementation and development of transit supportive plans and transit supportive development. And so there were 11 different economic benefits that are identified, and within the website itself, there is a PDF, a link to a PDF document that was put together by the consultant team that reviews these economic benefits, what they typically are, or what cities can expect, and then also provides links and information to the background data sources that were used to do the research and provide the support in terms of the financial or economic benefits that could come to a city as it promotes and implements transit-supported development. And the economic benefits are very wide-ranging. They include, as we noted at the top, increases in property tax revenue and sales tax revenue compared to more traditional suburban development or non-transit supportive development patterns. It helps to catalyze economic development, really encourage additional development within a district and even outside of that district in areas adjacent to it. Typically, in terms of a cost per square foot standpoint, both for the building cost itself and just providing the infrastructure, higher density development costs less than less compact development, both to build and to maintain in the future. It increases the potential demand for retail and office space within an area as you bring more people together and have them live in a more dense area. It increases demand for retail use. It tends to outperform lower density development in terms of operating costs, as I mentioned, utilization of resources and other elements. It helps to increase property values, increases returns for developers, so it becomes more, developers are more incentivized to build. And then transit locations can typically help cities provide more community amenities in terms of parks and available open space, as well as help to improve health outcomes for residents within the area as it encourages transit use, encourages walking, encourages cycling. And typically, housing and transportation costs for the residents within the transit supportive district can be lower than they would be in a more typical suburban location, because those residents will not need to drive as far as they typically do, and so they have savings in terms of the maintenance and fueling of vehicles. So the economic development tools that are identified include a range of tools that look at both federal, state, and local strategies, both focused on grant programs that are available, as well as financing or tax credit programs that developers and or cities and public agencies can take advantage of. We also identify at the bottom specific tools that cities can utilize, such as special districts or fast-track permitting, that provide an economic incentive to developers to build within a particular district or within a particular community or planning area. So a few of the tools that we'll highlight within the presentation at the state level, the different transit-oriented housing program and affordable housing programs that are being implemented as part of the state's cap and trade program. On the planning level, there's also the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program, which numerous cities and agencies do apply for and take advantage of to do and implement transportation planning efforts within their communities. We also looked at local economic development tools. These include the Metro TOD Planning Grant Program, which is a process that Metro has been facilitating and administering for several years now, and will be continuing to do so in coming years. And this toolkit itself will be incorporated within that grant program so that many of the tools and plans that we've identified here will be the types of plans that Metro will be encouraging or requiring cities to develop and implement as part of the grant program going into the future. There's also, as I mentioned, the tools and strategies that cities have available to them already, the historic preservation tools, the establishment of special districts, and the fast-track permitting, fee waivers, and other incentives that can be provided in terms of the approval process. Next is the community outreach, and this is the final major area within the tool, and then I'll walk through the elements of the website a little bit, and then following that we'll have an opportunity for you all to ask questions related to the toolkit itself. There were 8 key areas that we identified related to community engagement, and these are presented a little bit differently than some of the other tools for the other 4 to 5 categories that we organized the website around. These tools and these 8 items really are organized to be utilized together to put together a comprehensive outreach program that looks to be successful for the local cities and local communities. So these aren't items that you kind of pick and choose or apply as need be, but we really organize them and look to present them in a way where they're more of a roadmap for cities to be able to follow and implement as part of their outreach effort. And that includes, upfront identifying a clear plan for the community engagement, how that process is going to go, what the objectives of that process are, who are the key stakeholders and key participants in that process, so that everyone knows their role and the city staff can implement that outreach plan in a clear and defined process. And then the next steps are really focused on developing those partnerships with the community, engaging the key stakeholders, engaging the community itself, really early on from the beginning of the process so that the community can be an active participant in the effort and really look to be a part of the development of the plan itself. And items 4, 5, and 6, and 7 are really related to that, how you do that outreach using multiple modes of communication, trying to engage the community and making the process fun, reframing the discussion, trying to look at the planning effort or the project in a positive light and emphasizing the positive benefits that come to the community with this type of development. And in that vein, making it personal for members of the community and stakeholders so that they can understand the benefits that they'll see as a resident of the city, either as part of that transit supportive district or as part of the adjacent neighborhoods that are located nearby. And then finally, the 8th item, the use of the visual tools to engage. This really relates back to the making it fun and engaging the community, having tools and visual elements of the plan that really help people to understand what is being proposed and also help them visualize what the idea is for their community going into the future. So at this point, I will walk back to the website itself and walk through a couple elements of what we have gone through in terms of the presentation. So within the, as we mentioned, within the transportation and parking tools, there are 11 different tools that are identified, ranging from the more focused on the transportation, holistic transportation standpoint related to the transportation master plans, traffic calmings, and the development of travel demand management ordinances, to strategies that look to reduce or better manage parking within districts related to car share and ride share services, the implementation of shared parking and better utilizing available parking resources within a district, innovative parking design, parking benefit districts and parking management districts, again looking to better manage parking resources on a wider area, not just on a parcel by parcel basis. And then strategies for actually altering and refining parking minimums and maximums within the TOD district. And as Matt mentioned, each of these tools, if you click on them, it brings up a new tab within the website where there's information available about the best practice category that this tool is related to and relates back to the 10 categories that were available. Right now, within the draft form of the website, we're identifying the best practice categories by a number. In a later version, we'll be including images that correspond to the images that were shown on the categories themselves, so that you're better able to relate them back to that page and the information that's available. And within this tool, in each tool, there's a description that's provided, information related to the outcomes that should come from the application and use of this tool. And then there's examples provided as well. In this case, we have an example from Pasadena within Los Angeles County in terms of the parking benefit district that was established for the old Pasadena district. And then an example for a parking management program that was implemented within the city of Ventura, just up the freeway. So going back to the other tab within the urban design, again, on the site, we provide information, brief overview of what the urban design section provides, and then information related to each of the 3 tools that are provided in terms of building standards and design guidelines, the streetscape standards, and the community design overlays. And again, in a similar fashion, if you click on the link to a specific tool, it brings that tool up and has information related to the best practice category, provides a description, and includes photos of a type of project that could be implemented, provides that description, the outcomes that are expected to materialize from the application of the tool, and then examples and case studies that are available. So the next item within the website itself that I wanted to highlight is the environmental tools, which we had talked a little bit about as well. Back to the overview itself, and then the environmental tools. So the environmental tools, again, I think is another item that should hopefully be very beneficial to the city planning staff as you look to complete and fill out grant applications going into the future. There is information related to the different metrics that are typically requested within the grant applications. As I mentioned, the greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle miles traveled, mode share, and then there's information related below in terms of the models that we looked at, the outputs, and the pros and cons. The final version of the website will also include a link to a PDF memo that was put together that has more detailed information about each of the models, as well as links so that you're able to access the models and download them and start utilizing them and see how you might be able to apply or utilize them as part of your grant application process. So one of the other key items on the website that we wanted to highlight and share is the development of the case studies themselves and the accessibility of the case studies. As we mentioned, there's over 25 different tools that are available in the planning and policy tool element of the toolkit itself. And each tool has anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 different case studies available to it. And we wanted to be able to make these case studies accessible as easy as possible to you as a local agency and not force you to work through and kind of navigate through individual tools to be able to find something in particular that you may be looking for related to a particular case study. We really think that the case studies themselves will be one of the more valuable efforts or available pieces of information for users of the toolkit. And so as part of this, we've developed, or Metro has developed a database, a searchable database that can be utilized to access the case studies separately. And on the website itself, these are available on the right-hand side of the page under this tab that's provided, the case studies tab here, which I then clicked on, and it brought open a separate window that opens up. And this table is available, and it organizes the case studies and has searchable columns so that you're able to look the case studies alphabetically, which typically is usually by city, because that's usually the first word that is provided for each case study, but not in all cases. We then you're able to sort by category, whether that includes the economic and financing component, land use and planning. As you can see, there's quite a few categories, and then down to transportation and parking and urban design. You're also able to sort by the tools themselves. So if you'd like to see all of the case studies that are available for tools related to bike stations or building standards and design guidelines, they're all available here within this searchable database, and you have access to them. With the green buttons on the left, it brings up a synopsis of that case study, and then you're able to have a link down here at the bottom, which will actually take you to the document itself so that you're able to view that on the city or local agency's website itself. This database and this case study database will be further expanded in the coming weeks so that when the toolkit goes fully live, there'll be additional elements that you can search by. We heard in the in-person workshops that it would be helpful to be able to search the case studies by size of the community. That corresponds back to the small, medium, and large categories that Matt walked through in the presentation. And there may be some other searchability elements that we add to it. And we're certainly open to suggestions from those of you on the webinar if you have other ideas for how things might be helpful to be searchable in terms of the information that we we have available. So the last item that I'll walk through on the website itself before we turn it over to questions will be the outreach element. And again, the outreach element and all the different elements can be accessed not only from the tabs that are on the original landing page for the toolkit itself, but also on the right-hand side here, there's links to each of the various different categories of tools as well as the characteristics itself. And then there are links to other relevant programs, including Metro's TOD grant program, the Active Transportation Strategic Plan, the First Last Mile Plan, and the Green Places Toolkit. This webinar itself will also be available on the website. We're recording the webinar, and so once it's complete, it will be uploaded to the website and can be viewed and listened to in the future as well. So on the outreach side, I just wanted to highlight what's provided. Again, we looked at it's presented a little bit differently than the other tools in that there's not individual tools. It's a series of best practices that are identified, similar to what we walked through in the presentation, and focusing on the different elements. There's also case studies that are provided for each one of the best practices with links to the individual city site so that you can see the project itself, what was done by that city, and if you're interested, you can contact the city staff for more information on how they applied and utilized that outreach strategy. So at this point, that provides the general overview of the toolkit itself and has that component. And I think, Elizabeth, unless there's anything else that you think we should highlight, I'd like to offer our attendees the opportunity to ask questions. So if you have a question, on the right-hand side of your screen in the toolbar, there should be a box that you can put your question in and ask that question, and it should pop up for me to be able to see, and we'll announce that question and then be able to answer it. The one question that I did see early on, there's actually a couple that have come in. One is that will the presentation be available to the participants afterwards? And I think ultimately, yes, that is something that we can make available. So, Elizabeth, is there anything that you wanted to add before we go to other questions?
No, we can get to the questions.
Okay, great. So I have a couple others that have come in. The next question is the small, medium, and large community visual that Matt presented available on the website now? And the answer is, at this point, it is not available, but it will be. It will be part of the characteristics tab, and those graphics will be available, or we are planning to have those available on the website, so that they're there to help illustrate the different components and how those different characteristics can be applied in different types of places. And then the next question is where will the recording be posted so that people would be able to share the item with their colleagues. So as I mentioned, within the website itself, once we have completed the webinar will be posted and it will be available on the right-hand side of the website within the different components that are there. We'll hide my toolbar so I can see it. So when you're on the website itself, there will be a tab here that will have presentations and webinar, and we'll have the presentation that we walked through today as well as the webinar itself, links to those so that they can be downloaded from the website, and that'll be available once the website is live.
And one thing, this is Elizabeth from Metro, one thing I would add is that once we finalize the toolkit, the website, we will e-blast all who have participated and have advise that they're interested in this project and let you know when the website is live and the information is available. So we'll definitely follow up with everyone and send out a notification.
Okay, great. Other questions from attendees? I'll give it a moment just in case anybody's typing. Okay, in the interim, in case there might be other questions, we might have a question for our attendees if anybody is interested in providing this and typing it in the question box. One thing we've been asking at the in-person presentations or workshops is how cities, now that we've kind of walked through and provided a general overview of the website and the toolkit itself, is how you might see the website or the information that's contained within it being applied, how you might apply it, how you might utilize it in your day-to-day work efforts, or as you look to implement or start a transit supportive planning effort. We're certainly curious and interested to hear from you all how you might be utilizing the toolkit in the future. Okay. So we have a few comments that have popped in. First would be that it would be helpful for, that we think the toolkit would be helpful for staff to use to educate elected mayors and council members, as well as commissions and community leaders. That's good. Another comment, it would be nice to use it to build a framework for multiple outreach and planning efforts by members of the department. Great. I'll give it just a couple moments in case there's any other questions. I think for the most part we have walked through the elements that we wanted to share. I think as Elizabeth noted, we will be once the toolkit is live, Metro will be sending out an e-blast to all of the attendees for this webinar, as well as all of those that registered and may not have attended, may have had something come up. With information that will be available, a link to the website itself, as well as information about how you can download and access the information that's in the toolkit. Also, following this webinar, we will distribute to all of the participants a short one-page evaluation form that just has some questions in terms of the webinar here today, the information that you're able to obtain from it, and if it was helpful to you. So we would ask that you return that evaluation form to us within the next couple of days. Within that email, we'll identify a date we'd like to have that returned to us, and that would be very helpful for us as we look to finalize the website itself and the toolkit itself. Having your input and information will be invaluable for us.
Bill, it's Matt. I have a question for the group, if I may, and that is if anyone noticed any tools or any omissions to tools that you thought might be helpful. And then the other is, are there case studies that could be included on the website either now or at some point in the future that you think should be highlighted that might be really good examples for other planners around the region to think about and to look at? So if anyone has anything, go ahead and type them in and Bill can read their responses.
Okay, so we had our first one pop up, and then there's a question: are the case studies from other states, or are there case studies from other states and regions included in the site? There seems to be a focus on Southern California, and just kind of an interest if there's other case studies from other regions. And so I would say yes, there are. We've primarily put a focus on local examples within Southern California, but we have included case studies from elsewhere throughout the state of California, as well as other regions if they are applicable. There are quite a few examples that we have from the San Francisco Bay Area, I know for sure, as well as some other examples from other states as well. So that's all the responses that I've seen. Matt or Elizabeth, are there other questions that we wanted to engage the group with? Or
not on my end.
Okay.
Do you have any more questions, Matt?
No, I think that I think it would be helpful for folks to give some feedback on whether there's anything that's missing, and then how we can keep this website live and relevant. I think that would be sort of a critical component. And, you know, I think we are interested in whether there should be or could be some sort of discussion forum, more interactive piece to the website at some point in the future. And maybe folks can write those in their response forms that will be sent in later. But that's some information I think we would find helpful in completing the task that we have here before us now.
Definitely, Matt, I agree with you. We really want this to be as meaningful as possible to really effectuate this work. So certainly, I agree with you 100%. If you could all provide us your feedback and recommendations, that would be exceptional.
Exactly, and as well with the distribution of the evaluation form, we'll provide a link to the draft website, so you'd be able to take a look at it and explore. And if there's other things that come to mind as you have an opportunity to explore. So we did have one other question come up, and that it's related to grant funding, and if other future grant funding opportunities kind of appear or arise in the future, if they can be added to the toolkit in the future. And I would say, you know, ultimately, I think, you know, it's Metro's intent for this website to have some elements to it where it's kind of a living website. It's not a static. You know, once we're done with this effort, it stays the same in perpetuity, that it would be added to and refined in the future. And so I would, not to speak for Metro, Elizabeth, but I would think in the future you would look to, if other grant programs become available, identify those within the Toolkit website itself and have those available for the cities.
Definitely. So we certainly don't see this as a static document or resource, I should say. We want to get it out there, get it live. We haven't yet defined the time frame at which we would reevaluate it. We certainly intend on keeping on top of changing trends and really evaluating those best practices, whether they're funded by Metro or not. We really want to highlight good planning and, again, provide this leverage of resources for our region to do this kind of work. So we certainly plan on updating this and continuing to really maintain it as a great resource for our region, so certainly.
Great. Well, if there's no other questions, I think we have provided the overview we wanted to today, and I wanted to extend my thanks to all of you again for participating in the webinar and for logging on and following through here with us today. And as we mentioned, we'll be distributing the evaluation form to each one of you via email following this webinar, and we would certainly encourage you to fill that out, return it to us. It only has about 3 or 4 questions on it. but the input that you provide will be really valuable for us as we look to finalize the toolkit itself. And we certainly encourage you to explore the website, and as you see items that may come up that you may be interested in or that you may have questions about, certainly let us know about that. You can email those questions to me, or you can email those to Elizabeth, and I'm pulling up within here on the slide. Elizabeth's email address is here on the top of the slide, so you can jot that down, be able to send her any comments or questions that you may have, or additions, suggestions that you may have as well. So Elizabeth, did you want to just provide a quick thank you, and then I think we're complete for this webinar.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. I mean, more than anything, we really want to thank you all for taking the time to participate on this, and we certainly encourage you to provide us with your feedback. We think this is a great resource that, again, will help leverage our region, leverage our transit system, and the partnership that we can effectuate together to create really great planning. And really, to get there, we think we really need your feedback to let us know, what do you think about this? Is this the resource that we need? Is anything missing to help us really nail it down and have a great resource for our region? So again, thank you for your time. Thank you in advance for your input. And you know, we look forward to working with you in doing this kind of planning work in the future. Thank you so much.